What's going on, guys? It's ETA Prime back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the IPEGA 9167 Bluetooth controller for Android or iOS phones and tablets. I've done a lot of Bluetooth mobile controller reviews on my channel, but I've had a lot of people ask about the 9167, so I figured I'd go ahead and pick it up and see how it performs. Now, before we get started, I do want to mention that the Sataki 7007X or the 7007F is my favorite controller for Android. But unfortunately, with these bigger phones that are coming out, like the ROG Phone 2, it just won't fit. Even the Red Magic 3 or the 3S won't fit in the Sataki. So I've personally been looking for a bigger telescopic controller, and I've always had the IPEGA 9063, but it's getting a little long in the tooth. It's an older controller, we're not getting any updates for it, and in my opinion, it's a bit bulky for what it is. But the 9083 has always been my go-to for larger tablets like the Tab S6, the S4, and even the new Amazon Fire HD10. And hopefully the 9167 can be my new choice for larger tablets and phones. So this thing retails anywhere from $28 to $40 online. I picked mine up on Amazon for $32. As you can see, it's got a little gimmicky feature here where the right control unit detaches, so you can use half of it for touch and half of it for a real controller. For me, I'm really not going to be using it like that. I'll be using it as a full controller on both sides, but I will take a quick look at the additional detachable side. So inside of the box, you're going to receive the controller itself, a user manual, and a box of little accessories. We'll take a look at those in just a sec. The user manual itself is in Chinese, and there's an English part. Great, so we have an English and a Chinese manual. Inside of this little box, we're going to receive our USB Type-C cable for charging the controller up, a 90-degree 3.5mm audio jack attachment, because with most of these controllers, when you put your phone in here, it will block the headphone jack. And the additional right-hand side attachment, so we can remove the analog stick and buttons that are on the controller right now and place this on here in case you want to use this as a dual-purpose controller. You'll have half of it for touch and half of it with real controls. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the color scheme, but this is the only color I could find it in, yellow and black. The whole controller itself feels like it's built well for a $30 controller. We'll detach the right-hand control unit. And unfortunately, when this is detached, it's not wireless. It has to plug right into the controller itself. And this little guy should slide right on here. And like I said, you'll have a half-touch controller. I'm not a big fan of it, but it does work well with some games I've found in the past. As for battery life, they're claiming up to 12 hours of gameplay with this, and it'll fit up to a 250mm tablet. Now, one thing to note with this is it's not designed for smaller phones. It'll do 130mm to 250. Some of the lower end smaller phones will not fit in here properly, but this will fit up to an 11-inch iPad Pro. And as for all of the bigger screen gaming phones that are out right now, this should fit perfectly. I have the Asus ROG Phone 2. Fits right in here, nice and snug. It'll also work with the Red Magic 3 or the 3S. But one of the main reasons I picked this controller up was for tablet gaming. This is the Galaxy Tab S6. It'll also fit the Tab S4 or the new Amazon Fire HD10. And like I mentioned, it'll fit the iPad Pro 11. Overall, I'm really digging the design here. Like I said, I don't like the color scheme, but I can get used to it. We have USB Type-C for charging the controller up. Over on the right-hand side, we have A, B, X, Y, start, select, and an analog stick. On the right-hand side, we have another analog stick, turbo button, home button, and our D-pad. It is a separated D-pad, just like the PSP. And finally, 4 trigger buttons, L1, L2, R1, and R2. So unlike some of the new handheld consoles coming out, we do get all the buttons we need for retro gaming emulation or just all-around native Android gaming. There are a couple modes that you can pair this in, but I personally prefer using X input, kind of like the Xbox controller. It'll just work inside of Android, and any game that natively supports controllers, it should work, except for Call of Duty Mobile. Unfortunately, right now on Android, it only supports an Xbox One controller or a PS4 controller without any controller mapping app in the background. So pairing this up in X input mode is really easy. We're going to hold the up button on the D-pad and press the home button. This is going to put us in X input mode. We'll move over to our device, Bluetooth settings, we'll find the 9167, and we're now paired. The main reason I use X input mode is because I do a lot of emulation on my Android devices, and this will just work in 99.9% of all emulators. And not to mention native Android games that support controllers like Minecraft, Fortnite, Grid Auto Sport, and there's tons of others out there. The first thing I wanted to test here was Project xCloud. Now keep in mind I'm using xCloud and I'm not streaming from my Xbox natively. And to my surprise, it does work, and it works quite well. Unfortunately, these are not pressure sensitive triggers on here, and that's something you really want for a game like this. But other than that, it's working great with Project xCloud. It'll also work with the Steam Link or just streaming directly from your Xbox One. I was actually under the impression that only an Xbox One controller would work for this, but the IPEGA 9167 is working fine with xCloud. Next up, I wanted to test out some native Android gaming. Here we have Minecraft Pocket Edition. Didn't have to do any setup whatsoever, it just works. Moving over to one of my new favorite native Android games. This is Grid Autosport. This is a port for Android. They also have one for iOS. This is an amazing port if you have a device that'll run it at full speed. We're only at 30 FPS, but the game plays really well, especially with a controller like this. And for anybody wondering, this works straight out of the box with PUBG Mobile. I did have to pair it in a different way. Instead of pressing up on the D-pad when pairing it, I just pressed right on the D-pad, home button, paired it up, and it works directly out of the box. There's no pre-installed app or anything like that. It's just working with PUBG Mobile. Fortnite itself does support controllers natively on Android, and this controller works right out of the box. There was no setup whatsoever. I'm connected over X input, and it's working fine for this game also. And finally, a little emulation testing. Now, like I mentioned, since we're in X input mode, this is going to work with the Dolphin emulator, RetroArch, N64, SNES. Pretty much 99.9% of all emulators available for Android will work with an X input controller, like the IPEGA 9167. And overall, performance is great here. I don't notice any input lag. The D-pad works. I'm not a big fan of the separated D-pad, but as you can see, it is working. I can pull off some special moves. With a little more practice in this controller, it'll be perfectly fine. RetroArch is another one that a lot of people are going to be using. It detected it as soon as I booted it up. We're just running some Pico Drive here with Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and it works great. And of course I had to throw it in here, but the Dolphin emulator works. Now this is one where you will have to map the controller itself in the emulator, but it works fine as soon as you got all the buttons set up correctly. So in the end, I'm really enjoying this controller. I didn't think I'd like it as much. Looking at the pictures, the analog sticks looked a little odd, but they work well. If you're looking for a decent telescopic controller for your tablet or larger Android phone, the 9167 might be a good choice. Now that I've got my hands on this controller, I would definitely recommend it over the older IPEGA 9083. I just like the sleek design of this thing, and it feels really good. But don't pay over $35 for this. I have seen them as low as $24, but you'll be waiting a long time on shipping. I picked mine up on Amazon for $32, and I think that's a decent price for what I'm getting here. If you're interested in picking one of these up, I will leave a few links in the description. If you have any questions or you want to see anything else tested with this controller, just let me know in the comments below. But like always, thanks for watching.